Amud Aleph on page 23a. And yesterday we learned about the thickness of the schach. We mentioned how even though the Mishnah says it's fine to be thick, but we did say that it seems like there seems to be some inyan that you should be able to see stars, l'chatchila, preferably, and I'm not 100% sure, but I do think that there is a tradition in Lubavitch to have very thick schach. That's what I was told years ago. But it seems like there's definitely an inyan to have thin schach. But even if you have thick schach, you definitely should make some holes through it so you could see the stars. And just wanted to mention a Pri Megadim. The Pri Megadim says that it's possible that it's enough if one place in the whole sukkah you could see stars from it, because the reason for this law is that by seeing the stars, you will remember Mi bara Ela, who created these. And by doing that, you will feel that you are a stranger in the land and that you're temporarily here and not permanent. And it's enough. For these purposes, if you see the stars at one place in the sukkah. So he says the purpose of seeing the stars, and I thought I'd mention it because I think it's a interesting little insight that he adds, a little meaning behind. You know, we're here learning a lot of the laws, and even how we know the laws, but here you have a little understanding of the reason behind the law. He says the reason is that when you see the stars, it makes you start feeling that you're just a keger ba'aretz, that we are just like a stranger in the land, and we feel that we're not permanent. When you see the stars and you're outside, so you feel that it's or your roof is not permanent. That's for sure. So you feel that your metzias is aroyus, that your existence is temporary, ve'ena kavua, and it's not permanent. So for these purposes, he says it would seem like it's enough as long as you have certain places in the sukkah that you see the stars. That would be good enough. But they do bring from the Mekubalim Shar HaKavanos, maybe Kisvei Arizal, that you should see the Pisoid according to Kabbalah, according to the mystical secrets of the Torah. The star should be seen through the schach. Baal Mishnas Chasidim says also Apisoid, it should be filled with small holes that you could see the Kechavim Gedolim, at least the big stars. So anyway, it seems like there is definitely an inyan to see the stars, with at least that's what the commentaries seem to bring here about
Rabbi,
preferably
the holes.
Yes.
Do the holes they don't make a place where you're not supposed to sit, though. In other words, you poke these holes. Would have to be 3 tefachim.
So we talked about like
big.
how big would a hole be that it would be a problem to sit under, but that's much bigger than a little hole that you're poking with a pole, with a broomstick. The holes that are a problem to sit under, we've mentioned apply when it's number one, if it goes throughout the entire sukkah, so it could split the sukkah. If it's in other words, it goes from one end of the sukkah to the other. Or another situation that would be a problem if it's a hole in the sukkah would be if it's big enough for a person to person to stand under. In other words, like it's the size of a person's head, something like that. And that would be a problematic size that you wouldn't want to sit under it. Again, it wouldn't ruin the sukkah, but it would be problematic to sit under. But 3 tefach and 3 handbreadths ruins the sukkah.
So these
But
holes are more like you peek through, like the kind of
yeah,
like peek
yeah,
peek through
yeah.
holes to see if you
Right,
stand right and you say, oh, there's a star up there, and that's
right.
but that's the size they are. They're not anything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just small holes. There's no shilas about sitting under them. Um, the here in Florida, I don't know how common it is to have such thick schach. I think it's more when you use different types of schach. But here with the palm trees, there's so much airspace in between each leaf. I don't know, you'd have to really pile it up to be problematic, especially after a few days, the schach does get smaller. It shrivels a little also. But
Yeah.
in any event, that's what we did see in the halacha and in the commentaries. Okay, then we brought the Mishnah, and on page 22b we had the Mishnah that talks about making a sukkah on top of a wagon or a boat. And this, of course, was a topic of discussion with regard. We've had it before as well. Uh, the fact that it moves or that it is moving while you're sitting in it, and we had it not that long ago. Also on Daf Chaf Aleph, page 21, we had also we spoke a little about when it talked about keva. If it's permanent, the bed moves. So we spoke there about the fact that we have to deal with a Mishnah about having a sukkah on a wagon or on a boat. The boat moves. So again, it was a discussion. We touched on it before with regard to the bed, because the beds in the olden days were not so permanent. They were very temporary. They would move them around. Anyway, so our Mishnah mentions that you have a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a boat. It's kosher. You could even go on Yom Tov. You could go onto it on Yom Tov, and it's no problem. And we mentioned that Rashi says, interestingly enough, he says uh, that it doesn't even have to tell us that it's obvious that you can go on it on Yom Tov. It only mentions it for the other cases where you can't go on Yom Tov, but this is obvious. I mentioned that the commentaries do bring reasons why it's not such a obvious thing. Even though Rashi says it's obvious, there is reason. There's room to say that this is an innovation, something new, some chiddush here. There's something that it's telling us, and that is that there's room to say that you're not allowed to go on a boat, or at least there's discussion about going on a boat on Yom Tov. Really, you're not supposed to go on a boat on Yom Tov, and nevertheless, l'tzaref mitzvah, it's allowed. So that's why it's allowed here. So that's what the Mishnah has to tell us, that it's l'tzaref mitzvah and it's allowed. Anyway, bottom line is that you make a sukkah on top of a wagon or on top of a boat, it is kosher, and you could go on it on Yom Tov. If you put it on top of a tree or a camel, then it's kosher, but you can't go on it on Yom Tov. Why not? Because you have a problem of a tree. Trees, anything, even if you have a hammock's problematic on Yom Tov, on Shabbos, and Yom Tov, because we're afraid you're not supposed to be leaning on a tree or hanging on a tree. So one of the hammocks that we had, well, maybe all hammocks might have this. They have two different parts. They have a part that attaches to the tree with a hook, and then you attach the actual hammock to that part. But they sell it together. It's all like one. It's sold as one entity, because you need the top piece and you need the bottom piece. Now in halacha it talks about, if it's not hanging on the tree itself, but it's hanging on something else, it's permissible. So I always thought that that should mean that the hammock is fine to use on Shabbos or Yom Tov, because it's really two separate pieces. But I'm told, and Paisik was telling me that it's not true. That really it's considered like one. The poskim hold that it's considered like one piece, and you really can't because it's, I guess, attached to each other and it's meant for each other. So you can't say that it's two separate entities and your hammock is hanging on a hook and the hook is what's hanging on the tree, or the hook is what's being held up by the tree. Somehow the poskim understand that our types of hammocks, and I guess the same thing would apply to a swing. A lot of people have swings attached to a tree. So these things would be prohibited on Shabbos and Yom Tov. If you did create something that's not meant for it, maybe then you could say that it's okay. If you attach your own chain maybe around a tree, and then you attach a hammock to that chain, and the chain is not like meant for that hammock. So then you could then it would seem like that wouldn't be a problem. In other words, for sure, if you attach the hammock with the hook of the hammock to that for sure is like an extra step, something that's not part of it. So that for sure should be fine. Not that I know too many people using hammocks on Shabbos, but it would seem like that would be okay. Okay, so anyway, getting back to our case, we're talking about a sukkah. The sukkah is basically being it's on top of a tree, so you can't use on Shabbos. Yom Tov be a problem. It's on top of an animal or on top of a tree. Basically, similar issues about taking a stick and breaking off a branch and so on. And these are problems on Shabbos and Yom Tov. And Rashi brings Shema Yitzloish, you might break off a branch. And so bottom line is that you could build a sukkah there, according to the Mishnah, but it's Ein Oilen Law B'Yom Tov.
Mrs. Jimmy, remember today.
Okay, so that was the Mishnah, and the Gemara. That was the Mishnah. No, that was the first part of the Mishnah. The next part of the Mishnah mentioned that if you have shtayim bo'ilon and achas bidei, and these cases were getting a little confusing. It had to do with you have the majority of the sukkah is being held up by the tree, and a minority by bidei adam, or the opposite, a majority is bidei adam, is being held up by man-made support, and a minority of the sukkah is being held up by the tree. But all of these cases we said is kosher, but you can't go on it on Yom Tov. And the reason is because even if it's a minority that's holding up the sukkah, nevertheless, it's still being held up by the tree. And if you would take away the tree, it would fall. What happens if you have 3 of the walls being held up? Bidei Adam. They're made, the support is by man-made support, not a tree. And only one of the walls, which is the 4th wall, which is not a necessary wall, that's being held up by the tree. So in that case, it's kosher, and you could even go on it on Yom Tov, because even if the tree would be taken away, the sukkah would still stand, and you're not considered to using the tree. Now, you wouldn't be allowed to climb the tree to get up to the sukkah. You'd have to use an alternative method to get up to the sukkah. But sitting in the sukkah would not be a problem.
Wait a minute, a ladder that you put up
Yeah.
leaning against the sukkah.
Yeah.
Leaning against the tree, you can't do.
Yeah.
Leaning against the sukkah, you can.
Yeah.
And you're saying the sukkah is leaning on the tree.
No, the sukkah. This final case that
Oh,
I
it's
just
independently
mentioned
constructed, right?
is really a different case than the others. This case is you wouldn't call it majority or minority held up by the tree. This case is it happens to have a fourth wall that's the tree, but it's totally unnecessary.
Right.
Totally unnecessary. Yeah. Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah, but for Shabbos, you can't use the tree. Anything is attached to the ground as part of the sukkah. No?
So
As long as you don't touch it.
you're not really using the tree. That's the thing. It happens to be there. It happens to be a fourth wall. You're not using it. You don't need it. It's not. You're not.
We have trees. We have trees as our wall also. You can make it. You have a tree and a few bushes, and yeah, can get through it.
You use a tree as the wall of your sukkah.
It's part of it.
Interesting. The reason I
That
say
actually it's unnecessary. I actually can have a 3-wall sukkah because if you don't use it at all, it's okay. But
so the case that the way Rashi learns the case here is that the sukkah is high up. It's like in a tree, or it's part of the tree. That's the cases that the Mishnah was mentioning. And it's in the tree, it's on the tree, but it's also held up by external support. And now the thing is, in Shabbos, Rashi, this Mishnah is mentioned over there, is brought in Shabbos, and over there, Rashi translates it differently. And the way he translates it there is that it's actually on the ground, and you happen to have a tree, you're having trees as the walls, and it's regular, it's on the ground, it's not inside a tree, or it's not elevated. And the problem Rashi gives over there is that we're afraid you're going to put stuff on this, because the tree is the wall, you might end up hanging stuff on it or something. And so that's the way Rashi in Shabbos explains it. But for whatever reason, Rashi here doesn't learn it that way. And the commentaries talk about it. But Rashi here learns that. That's why I was asking you how if you're really using the tree as a wall, it might not be so simple. I didn't look it up in Shulchan Aruch, so I don't know what the final halacha is. But
bushes.
Hashem, I plan on looking it up. But if you're saying you have 3 other kosher walls, then it doesn't seem like that would be a problem. But anyway, that's good to it's interesting to know that Rashi and Shabbos.
No, I don't have the tree is not part of. It's not theirs. I'm sorry.
No problem. I'll come over and I'll eat in your sukkah. So the conclusion, the end of the Mishnah is Zehaklal, and that's on 23a, and maybe we'll just start there on the top of the page. 23a, Zehaklal. This is the rule. Page 23a, everyone, we're starting at the top of the page. Zehaklal, kol she'yinota lo ilon v'yochel lamed b'fnei atzmo. If the tree, if the sukkah could, if it was, this is the rule. If the tree was taken away and the sukkah could stand on its own, kashera, it is a kosher sukkah, v'oilon la b'yom tov, and you can go up into it on Yom Tov. According to the Rashi and Sukkah, it would mean v'oilon la, you can enter it, not to go up. According to Rashi here, it's you're actually going upward. You're climbing up in order to get onto this sukkah, because it's elevated and it's supported at least in part by the tree or next to it, but it's near the tree, or it's being held up by the tree, and all that. That would be, so you're going up. Oilan la b'yom tov means you're actually going up onto it on Yom Tov. And so the final case, the final case of the Mishnah was a case where you were able to do that, and the reason was because if the tree was taken away, you still have enough support that's holding it up. Okay, so the Gemara says, Mani Masnisin, who does our Mishnah go like? The Gemara says it goes like Rabbi Akiva. Here it goes like Rabbi Akiva. So there's obviously a machlokes, and the Gemara understands that our Mishnah seems to be paskening, or seems to be mentioning the view of Rabbi Akiva the Tanya, because we learned that a brayso, so Isus calls a Marcheshvan, person makes their sukkah on the top of a boat, of a ship. So Rabbi Gamliel paisel, Rabbi Akiva maksher. Rabbi Gamliel says it's pasul, it's invalid, and Rabbi Akiva maksher says it's kosher. And so, according to Rabbi Gamliel, our Mishnah doesn't flow, because our Mishnah says if you make it on top of a sfina, it's kosher, and Rabbi Gamliel would say it's pasul. And the Gemara, the Brisa even brings a story. Ma'aseh Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Akiva, they were coming on a boat. And interesting, it says ba'in basfina. So they were coming on this boat. So it definitely implies like it's traveling. Ba'in basfina. And Amad Rabbi Akiva was a sukkah b'reish asfina. Rabbi Akiva got up and he made a sukkah on the top of the boat. So he also allowed to make a sukkah on a boat. L'machar nashva ruach ba'karta. The next day, the wind came and it uprooted the sukkah. Amalei Rabbi Gamliel, Akiva. Rabbi Gamliel says, Akiva, heichon sukkah, where's your sukkah? No, where's your sukkah?
Yeah.
So Gamliel sort of like telling him, you so machmer, you made your sukkah. Where is it? Where to go? I thought you had a sukkah. I thought you. So
the English I have here, it's implied he's saying that it was unfit from the start. That's what they add in to explain
right.
What does he mean by where's your sukkah? It was never a good sukkah to start with. Is basically what he's saying here.
That's the shtech. And what's the
where's
proof
your sukkah?
He doesn't mean physical. He means where's your sukkah that you said was in your
right.
That was kosher.
Right.
He doesn't mean the physical one. He means the halachic one that Rabbi Akiva said was okay.
And that's really what he's saying is like, you thought that this was a kosher sukkah. Where is it? Meaning this proves that it's not, that it never was kosher. The fact that it wasn't sturdy enough to handle it. Now, the commentaries do deal with an issue here. So what did Rabbi Gamliel do? He where was his sukkah? No. So one commentary says he probably built it somewhere lower. Akiva says you can build it anywhere on the top of the ship. So he built it on the top of the ship. Rabbi Gamliel built his sukkah maybe lower down in a place where it was more safe, more sturdy. There might have been, the less wind and so on. But other commentaries say no. It would seem that Rabbi Gamliel didn't. It was a Ines Rachmana Patri. He had no choice. There was no way to build a sukkah. He says it's not going to be a kosher sukkah. You can't build it. And also, there's a concept that the person who's traveling is pater, exempt from a sukkah. So we'll see that later on in the Masechta Mitzvah Hashem. But anyway, commentaries do try to deal with what about Rabbi Gamliel? Yes, David.
Hey, Rabbi Akiva, his thing was V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. He didn't want to come back to Rabbi Gamliel and needle him and say, "Oh, well, where's your sukkah? You're going on the boat without a sukkah. You need a sukkah." He didn't want to do that because his whole thing was Abbas Israel.
Not only that, he was telling Reb Gamliel all night, "No, come in my sukkah, come in," he was inviting him, pulling him in, probably. But good point. Anyway, so the bottom line is, I mean, the fact is, it was a halachic issue that they're debating. So not like, I mean, he was a little rough, maybe on him, but it was a halacha. It wasn't like he was just the stam making fun of him. But the argument here is what the Gemara is going to deal with now. Like, what is the source? What's behind this argument? So Amar Abai de Kol Yalma, Rabbi says everyone agrees. If the sukkah, couldn't stand on a regular wind, if it was on regular dry land, like klum, this would not be considered. It would be worthless. It would not be considered a kosher sukkah. So even though it's standing for a few minutes or something, but if regular wind is going to knock it over, that would not be considered a kosher sukkah at all. Now, what about if it could stand winds that are not usual, that are unusual winds, like hurricane winds or so on? So then, everyone agrees it's kosher. So even if it does, for some reason, blows away, that would be considered just some type of a freak, or so, it just happened. It's some things could happen, but this was a solid sukkah. It could even handle a hurricane wind. Something happened that it blew. It was extra strong or something. But this was a solid sukkah. So then everyone would agree. Even Reb Gamliel would agree that it's kosher. Now, where do they argue? When do they argue? So when do they argue? In a case where it could stand the regular winds of the dry land, but it can't handle. And here you have the two different ways of reading it, which basically mean the same thing. It can't handle either a beruach she'ena matzuya di'abasha, or the wind that's unusual on dry land, or you could read it beruach matzuya di'am. It can't handle a regular wind of the ocean, and basically it means the same thing. That they were talking about much stronger winds. And these type of winds are not usual on regular dry land, but they are more common on the ocean. And therefore, this would be a sukkah that's somewhere questionable. And Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Gamliel debate, is it kosher or not kosher? They each have their opinion. Rabbi Gamliel thought sukkah diras kava beinan.
Where are you eating? You could probably eat it in dry dock, but you cannot eat it at sea.
Right. So this is what you wanted to say yesterday. But the thing is, I mean, I mentioned now that if you look at the words, it says boyin besfina. They were coming. It sounds like the boat was traveling. They were coming in the boat, and they were traveling in this boat. So it doesn't seem like it was just docked. And if it was docked, you would think that, they would probably not be going on it on for their sukkah purposes. You would think they would. Reb Gamliel maybe would have built a sukkah, at least Reb Gamliel on land or something.
Right. You also have to remember they did not have cruise ships with 3,000 people on them.
Right.
They had ships, small ships.
Right. Right, definitely. So anyway, the bottom line is that and I tried to see if any commentaries mentioned what you wanted to say, and I didn't see anything. Again, I didn't look at every commentary, but I didn't see the commentaries mentioning that idea about that it's docked and it's right near the ocean. It sounds like an interesting shot, but it doesn't seem to fit. So anyway, bottom line is that we've got an argument between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Gamliel if the ship if a sukkah that's on a ship, and basically it's somewhat sturdy, because if it was on dry land, it would be sturdy. But the fact is, it's on a boat and it's in the ocean, and therefore it really is not too sturdy. And Gamliel says that, then it's invalid from the beginning, and it's worthless basically. And Rabbi Akiva says no, this is considered a sukkah, and it should be okay as long as it's there while it's there, while it lasts. Now, the Gemara here spells it out. It says, Rabban Gamliel savar sukkah diras kava be'inan. Rabban Gamliel holds that sukkah needs to be a diras kava, needs to be a permanent dwelling. And since this can't handle the winds of where it's standing, it's now on the sea. It can't handle the sea regular winds. Like klumi, it's worthless. Now, Akiva savar sukkah diras arai be'inan. Akiva holds that a sukkah could be a diras arai. It's temporary. And since it's all you need is it to be a temporary dwelling. A temporary dwelling, you're not expecting it to last forever. This is a temporary dwelling. So if it can handle a ruch mitzuyah diabasha, it can handle a dry land winds. Then it's called a diras arai. Whereas a temporary dwelling, it's kosher, it's kosher. And nowadays we're not used to these type of things. I don't think, where things might just blow away and and you're going to dwell in it. But I guess in the olden days, I guess it was more common to have things like you really knew that things weren't going to last too long, and the fact is that they would use things like that while it's lasting, you use it, and it blows away. So according to Rabbi Akiva, this is considered a diras arai, and it's good enough. Now, I asked yesterday, it seems very surprising. Rabbi Gamliel's opinion to us, at least to me, sounds more logical than Rabbi Akiva's. Rabbi Gamliel says, listen, you're on the ocean. This is a regular wind for where it is. It's going to blow away, and therefore it should be considered invalid. I don't care if you hold diras arai, diras keva, even diras arai. It's going to blow away in a natural wind where it is. We're not just worried about during hurricane season, and if they announce a hurricane, then you have to be worried. No, this is the regular ship, regular on the ocean, the regular winds. This is going to blow away. So you can't. How can Rabbi Akiva hold that it's going to be kosher? And that was something that bothered us yesterday, and the commentaries try to come up with explanations of diras arai. He holds it could be temporary, and I did see one of them that mentions that when you diras that Rabbi Akiva hold, the main thing is that it has to have a halacha of a mechitza. If it's called a mechitza, it's a wall. So it's going to blow away. As long as it has a din mechitza, then it's considered. If it has a din of a law of a partition, a halachic law of partition, that's considered a sukkah. So the fact that it's going to blow away in the yam, that doesn't make it not a sukkah, because he doesn't hold that it has to have a din sukkah. It has to have a din mechitza. And if it has to have a din mechitza, this is an interesting halacha from the Brisker Rav. Holds this, says this in the Rambam. And he brings down this idea.
What is a din mechitza? Certain height?
Yeah, it has that it's also fit, that it's fit on dry land. In other words, the dinei mechitza are that on dry land it's considered solid enough on dry land. So if it could handle a wind of dry land, then it's called mechitza. Then you moved it onto a boat, or it's on a boat, it's still considered a mechitza. Now,
Rabbi,
according to Rabbi Gamliel, that's not good enough. It has to be a proper sukkah that's going to handle the wind. That's one way of learning it. Again, there's other commentaries that they deal with this issue, but that's the argument. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Gamliel. Yes, David.
the mechitza in the shul to separate the women from the men. Maybe it can be learned from that, or not.
No. That's a separate law. that's not necessarily a din machitza. That's just in fact, there's a whole debate on what constitutes a machitza for a shul, and what, like, for example, they is it all about just separating the men and the women, or is it about that they shouldn't see each other? You know, and there's the debate basically boils down to, can you use a glass mechitza? Because if it's all about separating the men and the women, and there'd just be a separation that they're not next to each other, so the glass separates them. They're not, they're not together. And but if it's not to have any thoughts during davening, so then a glass mechitza wouldn't work. So they used to joke around about the Lincoln Square synagogue because it was a glass mechitza. They would call it the wink and stare synagogue.
It was also in a big circle.
New York joke. That's a New York joke, I guess, right?
Yeah, but the Lincoln Square synagogue was also a big circle. The chazan was in the center, and everybody was facing him.
Where were the women?
In that circle, half the shul was men, half the shul was women, but everybody was facing each other.
Anyway, somehow they have a machitza there. What'd you say, Ezra?
I thought it was
I was
the second
there.
floor for the
My
women.
cousin got married there.
Oh, what did you say, Ezra?
I thought there was a second floor. That's where the women were.
So I don't know. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah.
Rabbi,
yes, Moshe.
Isn't this a minhag? I mean, having glass opposed to having a mechitza where the men and the women can't see each other.
No, very serious, very serious.
Because I have seen a glass mechitza on the beach at a Beit Knesset where they have a glass mechitza. It's not transparent where you can see through it, but
but that's the thing.
But you can see the women through, but it's as long as
so the question is how clear can you see the women? That's really what it boils down to. How clear is it? Is it etched? And how close are the etches? You know what I mean?
One of the shuls they use it's a one-way mirror glass.
That's what
Women
we
can
did at
see out, but
Share.
the men don't see anything in. So
That's what we did at Share. You go to the women's section, you have a perfectly clear view of the men. You go to the men's section, you see trees.
What happens if they install it backwards?
Then you put the men on the other side.
Okay. I was thinking the mechitza as far as the shul. What'd you say, Ezra?
It's not fixed. You can turn around the mechitza and you'll get it in the right direction.
Yeah, I was joking, but I was thinking that the shul mechitza as far as the height.
That's another discussion, right? The height, how high it has to be. In any event, all right. Here we're dealing with,
or as in the shul of Bal Harbor, they have the women upstairs. There was a perfect separation between the two, but they didn't figure it that they had to put a little low curtain in front of each row because when the women sat down, that angle you were able to see. Couldn't see their heads, but you could see them sitting down. So they built a little curtain in front.
They did? They added a curtain afterwards?
Yeah, go to Shul Bal Harbor. Upstairs, they have a little section with there's like a little white curtain, and that's what it is.
Right. Yes, Mordechai.
Yeah, that reminds me of a joke about that when Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, visited Israel, Golda Meir supposedly took her to a shul, and then when she got back to India, they asked her what it was like, and she said, the men sit down below, and the prime ministers sit in the balcony.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, so so back to the Gemara over here. So we have this argument, Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Gamliel, about this sukkah on the boat, and And the truth is, there's a discussion if we're supposed to have in the wording of the brisa, if it's supposed to say also about a wagon, or is this only about the boat? In other words, would this halacha apply? Is this argument also applicable on top of a wagon? We dealt with it really on a Tosfos over here on the page 21b, where we talked about, this is where we were getting into in the case of the bed that moved around. We dealt over there with the fact something that moves, is that a problem? And does that ruin? Maybe we'll talk a little more about it tomorrow. I want to go a little further. So we're going to continue with the next Gemara. Oyal gabe gomel, on top of a camel. So masnisin mani. So the Gemara says, who does the Mishnah go like, where it talks about having a sukkah on top of a camel, that you're not allowed to go on it on Yom Tov? So the Gemara says, masnisin mani, who's the Mishnah go like? Reb Meir here, it goes like Reb Meir, the Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, this is because it's got to be behema. Person builds a sukkah on top of an animal. So basically, what you do is you put you remember, I don't know if you remember, when we learned about the paraduma, the red heifer. So we talked about putting a door on top of the animal, and that's where they sat on. So here also, what you're doing is you're putting like a board as a floor on top of the animal, and then you have the walls of the sukkah, and then you have the schach. And so you built a sukkah on top of an animal. So the Gemara says that a person who does it, it's a machlekes, it's brisa that brings a machlekes from Meir Reb Yehuda if it's kosher or puzzle. Yes, David.
I was going to say where it like the Steinsaltz Gemara fills in the empty spaces. So here he says, if one establishes a sukkah on top of a camel, the sukkah is fit.
Fit.
Yeah.
Then the Gemara is asking, who's the Tana of the Mishnah?
Yeah,
So
it's kosher. That it's kosher.
Oh, okay.
Fit means
okay.
Yeah. So this was our Mishnah. We just read that in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that the person that you could have a top of a camel, it's kosher. You can't go on it on Yom Tov. That's what we just read. So we said, who does the Mishnah go like? Meaning, who's this following? Whose opinion is this? The Gemara says that this is Reb Meir. That Reb Meir is going to allow us to build a sukkah on a gomel, on a camel, and it won't be a problem. And we have a brisa. Reb Meir says kosher, and Rabbi Yehuda says invalid, puzzle. Rabbi Yehuda puzzle. So the Gemara says, my taima to Rabbi Yehuda. What is the reason of Rabbi Yehuda that it's not kosher? What's the problem? So Amar Kra, so it says in a pasuk, that it says the holiday of Sukkot should make for yourself. The holiday of having sukkahs, you should have 7 days. So the Gemara darshans, the Gemara expounds on that. That means that the sukkah has to be fit for 7 days. Sukkah ru'uya l'shiva shma sukkah. Sukkah she'ena ru'uya l'shiva loy shma sukkah. That a sukkah has to be fit for 7 days. If it's not fit for 7 days, then it's not considered a kosher sukkah. So here we spoke about building a sukkah on top of a camel. We said that it's kosher. And Reb Meir, the Gemara says that this must follow Reb Meir, because we have a brisa that talks about a sukkah on top of an animal, and Reb Meir is the one who allows it. Reb Yehuda doesn't allow it. The question was, what was the problem? Why is there a problem with a sukkah on top of an animal? And the answer is that the problem is that you're not allowed to go on top of an animal on Yom Tov. And if you can't go on top of the animal on Yom Tov, as our Mishnah says, that it would only be kosher for certain days of Sukkot, and not Yom Tov or not Shabbos. So if you can't go on it, so then it's not considered a kosher sukkah. Sukkah has to be fit for 7 days. If not, it's loy shma sukkah or loy shmei sukkah. It's not considered a sukkah. Reb Meir. So what does Reb Meir do with this? So the answer is hanami midaraisa mechsach chazyo. this also is fit biblically for a sukkah for 7 days. Rabbanon who the gozru, but and the rabbis who were goyzer, who made a decree about not going on Yom Tov. So what's interesting is, why aren't you allowed to go on the sukkah, to go on an animal? It's a rabbinic decree. It's a rabbinic decree. What does the Torah say about a sukkah? A sukkah has to be fit for 7 days. And we learned from there that biblically your sukkah has to be a sukkah that could last for 7 days. We've seen this before about what happens if you put enough schach that's not enough to last for 7 days, could be a problem. So if it's gonna dry up before 7 days, and then you're not going to have enough schach, it could be a problem throughout Sukkot, even the first days of Sukkot. Yes, Jeffrey. Yeah, you're muted. You're muted. We gotta unmute you. Bottom left, generally. There should be a red line, the bottom left. A red line blocking the audio.
I know where it is, but I
click on the screen
Now
and
it's
then
okay.
do unmute.
Yeah, I know where it is. It doesn't come up automatically. But I think this is the perfect example of the extreme case. This is the most extreme case of all that we've had, because we talked about a sukkah that is a dira serucha, that a sukkah that's not a residence, and Yehuda holds always that it has to be diras keva, and it has to be built by man. Well, this was built by man, but we also discussed about the minimal size of a sukkah. This doesn't even meet the minimal size, except that it meets the measurement that it has rosho verubo. And I guess you could say it also has his shulchan in it. But we had a picture of it, right? David showed us a picture. And so it seems to me that's perfectly here, because it's the most extreme of all the examples. And so if a sukkah is a residence, and that's what Perek 2 is about, that is this a residence? Clearly, this is not a residence. Clearly, this
On a
is
ship it is.
We're talking about a camel.
Oh,
So,
camel on a ship. No, okay.
So yeah, just stay tuned. We got some more cases coming, and we've got other discussions with Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda. So stay tuned a little further, Jeffrey, and we'll see more. Okay, but good point. Jeffrey's mentioning that we've seen Reb Yehuda before holds about the permanence of a sukkah, that it's important for the sukkah to be permanent, which was not necessarily everyone's view. And Reb Yehuda held that, and he held that the sukkah needs to. It could be even over 20 amos, even very tall. It would mean that it's very permanent. And so we seem to see this concept of Rabbi Yehuda holding a permanent sukkah. So this is also a continuation of his view that at least in some sense, where the sukkah is going to be puzzle if it's on top of an animal, and the reason is because it's not going to handle 7 days. Now, so it sounds like it's connected to that idea that that it's not permanent enough. In other words, something that lasts 7 days is more permanent. It can't be used for 7 days. You can't use it all 7 days. It's not really considered permanent, or it's not fit, unless you learn that it's not connected. And he does say a pasuk here that it's like a pasuk that it has to be 7 days. So in other words, what you're adding to this insight, Jeffrey, is that you're saying that the meaning of the pasuk, Chag HaSukkah Tasa L'cha Shivas Yamim, is along the lines, like this is like the meaning of why does it have to last? Why does it have to be a sukkah that's roy for 7 days? What you want to say is it's connected to the concept of that's explaining in other words, it's a halacha that tells us that the sukkah needs to be kavua, needs to be permanent. That's a beautiful insight. In other words, you take that with you, and then we take that around to see all the different places where Rabbi Yehuda says his halacha, and see if this might be the original source or connected to the source of where he gets that from, that the sukkah needs to be permanent. In other words, is this his source? Because we have a pasuk here, or you could say that it's totally disconnected. A sukkah has to be permanent. And also, a sukkah has to be fit for 7 days. So you could argue with you as well. I'm just saying, like, it's a nice insight that we have to see and take it with us and see if that fits with all the other Gemaras of Rabbi Yehuda.
It's like Rabbi. In other words, you can't have a Chol Hamoed sukkah and a Yom Tov sukkah. It's got to be the same sukkah. Can it be the same sukkah that's only good for Chol Hamoed, but it's not good for Yom Tov? So,
right.
In other words, it has to work for both. It sounds like, according to the first rabbi. What was it?
According to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, yeah. Now, Reb Meir allows it.
According to the Rabbanan also, because they said that you can't go up on the first day because it's on an animal, but that's not from the Torah law.
So this is the question here. Now we got to really get into this, and the issue that we deal with now is the fact that use your biblical glasses. Put on your think about halacha from the Torah. Are you allowed to go on an animal, on a sukkah that's on top of an animal on Shabbos and Yom Tov? Yes. The rabbinic decree, you can't go on it. So the Torah says that your sukkah has to be usable for 7 days. Is this sukkah usable for 7 days according to the Torah law? It is. You're allowed to go on it on Shabbos. You can go on it on Yom Tov. You're not doing anything wrong. It's fine. According to the Torah law, it's okay. The rabbis came along and said, we got a little problem. You're gonna sit on an animal. You're gonna take a branch and use it to direct the animal, and so on. And therefore, you're going to transgress the prohibition of Shabbos or Yom Tov. Therefore, we can't have you going on top of animals on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and it's prohibited. Okay, so that's a rabbinic law. Does that rabbinic law then ruin the biblical law that the sukkah has to be fit for 7 days? I mean, the sukkah is fit for 7 days. It's biblically fit for 7 days. Rabbinically, I just can't go on it. But it's not that it's not fit. So, and really, another way of asking this question is, does Reb Meir agree with the Chag HaSugos Tasa L'Chashivas Yamim? Does he agree with this halacha that we saw that Reb Yehuda said? Does he agree with this limud that a sukkah has to be fit for 7 days? And if you look at the Gemara, it implies like he does. Reb Meir says, yes, of course it's got to be fit for 7 days. But this is fit, midoraisa, mechse chazi. So really what I'm just doing is bringing out the wording of the Gemara. The Gemara says these words. The Gemara says, Reb Meir says, this is fit for 7 days, because biblically it's fit. Rabbanon who the Gazruba, and it's the rabbis who made a gzeira, they made a decree against it. So Reb Meir says that this doesn't ruin the law of said this doesn't affect the law of 7 days. 7 day law would apply to anything biblical, but if it's rabbinic, then it's not gonna have an effect. And Reb Yehuda holds no, it goes by the practical side of it. Are you unable to enter it for 7 days? The rabbis made such a decree, so it's not fit. Once the rabbis made the decree, it no longer becomes fit for 7 days. So what ends up happening is that if someone transgresses and goes on it, well, it's actually not considered a kosher sukkah. In other words, what the rabbis made a decree, and all of a sudden, biblically, it ruins it. It's no, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's no longer a kosher sukkah, even biblically, because the rabbi said you can't go on it. So now it's not a sukkah that's fit for 7 days. So now biblically it becomes not a sukkah. It's not a sukkah that's fit for 7 days.
But this one challenges everything. There's no walls. It doesn't stand by itself. it can only fit a very small person in it.
Now there is a very interesting. I'm
That's
sorry. What were you saying, Jeff? Say that again.
This is the challenge to all of the things we've studied, because it doesn't have four walls, and it can only accommodate a part of a person, and it is designed for moving. It's on something that's moving. It can't stand by itself. Not the least example that we saw. It's not even.
I don't think any of. I don't think what you're saying is correct. It is the right size. It is. It does have walls, and the sukkah has walls. It has a floor. It has walls. You built walls. It has schach on it, so it has the right size. It's not now. The fact that it's moving is this topic of a discussion. Of course, that's one that we're dealing with, and we're going to be discussing about of course, the Mishnah was the source of this whole concept that we sort of have to wrap up all the Gemaras that we've seen in the past. But it does have a wall. It's not it's not like it doesn't have walls, and it's not like it doesn't have the right size. It does.
Yeah, but you can't eat in it.
Why can't you eat in it? Smells?
You get nauseous. No, I'm saying you can't.
Take your Dramamine or whatever. So
on your dromedary.
Rabbi,
yes,
on a boat, they also can't. They can't
can I
eat
ask you, an animal, you say any animal a sukkah can be built on top of?
Oh, what you mean? What if it's non-kosher animal? You wondering?
Yeah, I'm curious to know if there's
Well,
Well,
camel's not
gumbo.
kosher.
because we're talking about any
Camel's
animal.
not kosher.
So we're gonna soon
An
see
animal,
about using.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. A camel is not kosher. But
Right.
what happens if you're eating on a camel and all of a sudden it bleeds?
Oi!
Yeah, what would happen then?
Or something happens. What happens then? Or it snorts and you get saliva from it.
Oi!
It comes into, it turns around. What happens then?
I don't know if your dog licks
No,
your
what
face.
do you do?
Well, that's what
What
I'm
do you
asking.
suggest? What are you suggesting? What do you think, Moshe? What should you do?
I'm asking you. I'm asking.
You
I
boil his
I'm
tongue.
not building it on an animal, so I'm not gonna have this problem.
No, but it is kosher. I mean, if you fulfill the mitzvah.
Oh, you want to know if the saliva is kosher, or you have to throw out your sandwich?
Well, no, the blood. I'm saying the
Question.
blood.
What?
Dam,
It depends if you're eating milchiks or fleishiks.
You'll have to decide. You'll have to ask a rub. Might be batal b'shishim. It might be mixed. If it falls in the chicken soup, it might be might be batal. You could eat it. It's batal. Well,
Hey, it's Gesund, Rebbe. Thank you.
ask a rub. Okay, so we're gonna stop here. Sei gesund.
Thank
Have a
you,
great day.
Rabbi.
Thank you.